Ankoatriny kiraikitra raika izy efa lasa nikary a.
Ratsy lasiny. Valao moa mandeko tsy misy tsony ao. Tsy misy akotriny.
Sia. In preceding forum sessions throughout 2022. As such, this meeting will examine the new membership nominations with the aim of expanding the umbrella and the network of the CVF to cover more vulnerable countries. We are stronger together. To commence our work today, I will shelve the statement by the Honorable Minister of Environment, Science, Technology, and Innovation of Ghana, and it to be uploaded online. So straight on course, I would now like to invite the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC to give a statement. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, colleagues, friends. It's a pleasure to join you at this forum of vulnerable nations, those nations most threatened by a shared climate emergency in my new capacity. I'm from a small island developing state, a climate vulnerable nation, Grenada, a member of the CVF. And like you, I've seen how climate change wreaks havoc on the lives of our families, friends, and neighbors. We've all at one time or another been described as being on the front line of climate change. Yet after the last few months of climate catastrophes, it's clear that those lines now stand in front of every person on this planet. The bottom line is that the science is clear. Our collective response to the emergency has been incremental. There are significant gaps between where we are and where we need to be if we're to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. COP27 will be a gear shifting point as we pivot from negotiations to implementation and demonstrate progress on the Glasgow outcomes. That's why COP27, just 1 month from now, is so important. And it's why this forum and the resulting communique is so important to the COP itself. Yes, it's about hearing your interests, you the most effective and least responsible for the climate crisis. But it's also about what you expect COP27 to concretely deliver with respect to implementation and in all of the 4 core work areas. In the spirit of openness, let me share with you some areas I feel progress is needed in the 4 areas. With respect to mitigation, in Glasgow, all parties, especially G20 nations, were instructed to revisit and strengthen their national climate action plans. They agreed to submit their plans to the UNFCCC by September the 26th. What did we receive? 23 out of nearly 200 parties submitted their revised climate plans. Nations must fulfill their promise to each other, to the world, and to deliver stronger climate plans now. They still have time, and we urge them to do so. Adaptation is another area where we need to scale up implementation through national adaptation plans. In Glasgow, parties promised to double adaptation support to $40 billion by 2025. To that end, we require concrete proposals on how this will be delivered to demonstrate the credibility of this commitment. And we need an outcome on the global goal for adaptation that captures and locks in progress made in 2022, while also providing direction to its work program in 2023. Of course, we need progress with respect to finance in other areas as well. Developed nations must, at long last, fulfill the $100 billion commitment to developing nations that was promised a decade ago. On another front, national business and finance leaders must show how they will transform the financial system and align financial flows with current and required climate change commitments. In the same vein, we also need clarity on how to mobilize the necessary trillions of dollars of private finance away from fossil fuels and towards renewable forms of clean energy. Finally, we need a frank discussion and make substantive decisions about loss and damage. It's an issue whose time has come. Among other things, that means finalizing an operationalization of the Santiago network, including the full financing of it. We also need to take concrete steps on how to address loss and damage finance beyond the Glasgow dialogue. It is an issue that cannot be deferred any longer. So in conclusion, colleagues, climate change and its effects have become our constant companion, our constant threat, and our constant worry. As your invitation letter so aptly puts it, our very survival has never been so threatened. It's time to turn things around. We know collectively where we are falling short, and we know how to correct the current course we are on. If leaders in both the public and private sphere commit to slashing emissions, building resilience and fulfilling their commitments under the Paris Agreement, and if they come to COP27 ready to achieve consensus on admittedly very complex and contentious issues, then I believe we will begin to see some real progress. It is a tall order, I know, but with your help and with the goodwill and determination of all parties, I know we will prevail. I thank you.
Thank you very much for the inspiring message. Mr. Simon Steele, the Executive Secretary of UNFCCC. Thank you once again. I now call on Madam Excellency Eva Maseba Masudi, Honorable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Environment of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I am Professor Malassi, Climate Change Advisor to the Vice Prime Minister, and I'm reading the statement of Her Excellency on behalf of herself. The Congo being a French country, you will please allow me to read the declaration in French. Excellence, honorable invité, chers collègues, bonjour. J'ai l'immense plaisir de m'adresser à vous tous à l'occasion de ce dialogue de haut niveau du Forum des Nations vulnérables au changement climatique, CVF, organisé par la présidence ghanéenne du CVF et présidé par le président du CVS, son Excellence Nana Akufo-Addo, honorable président, honorable ministre du Ghana, lors du pré-COP27 à Kinshasa sous la présidence égyptienne, qui réunit les chefs d'État et de gouvernement du CVF ainsi que les dirigeants de certains acteurs clés non CVF, des observateurs et des partenaires essentiels. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes tous réunis en tant que leaders les plus menacés par l'urgence climatique pour articuler nos priorités globales et pour galvaniser les programmes et les partenaires et les partenariats du CVF avec la présidence de la COP27, les leaders clés et pour promouvoir l'ambition dans l'action climatique et les résultats de la COP27 en faveur du CVS. Les réunions de haut niveau comme celle-ci sont d'une importance capitale pour les CVF qui s'efforcent de coordonner et de mettre en œuvre un programme ambitieux et de plaider pour que la COP27 prenne des décisions adéquates pour répondre aux besoins d'adaptation des 55 membres du CVF en 2022 et au-delà. Les nations vulnérables sur le plan climatique ne se contentent pas de prendre l'initiative par le biais de leurs propres actions nationales en faveur du climat, mais sont également à l'origine d'une ambition désespérément nécessaire au niveau mondial. Le nombre et la fréquence des catastrophes naturelles dans la région africaine ont récemment augmenté. La double menace du changement climatique et des catastrophes d'origine humaine a rendu les conséquences plus dévastatrices dans de nombreux pays de la région. Les risques naturels tels que la pénurie d'eau, les tempêtes de sable et de poussière, sécheresses, la déforestation, l'extinction de la faune et de la flore ne sont que quelques exemples. En République démocratique du Congo, le changement climatique devrait accroître les vulnérabilités actuelles. Si l'impact biophysique sera important avec l'augmentation des températures et les changements des précipitations en raison de sa pauvreté généralisée, de sa forte densité de population et de la situation conflictuelle du pays, la grande vulnérabilité de la RDC est principalement liée à des facteurs socio-économiques. La sécurité alimentaire sera affectée par les pertes et les mauvaises récoltes, l'augmentation de la mortalité du bétail, les impacts négatifs sur la pêche et les dommages aux infrastructures. C'est pourquoi il est si important pour nous de nous rassembler et d'agir pour montrer au monde que nous n'abandonnons pas, que nous sommes prêts à nous battre pour notre survie, pour affirmer avec confiance que notre peuple compte et que notre nation compte et que nous choisissons un avenir de prospérité et de sécurité climatique. Travaillons donc ensemble pour faire en sorte que les pays développés remplissent leurs obligations de financement annuel de 100 milliards de dollars, comprenant un fonds égal pour l'atténuation et l'adaptation. Et nous devons également travailler ensemble pour que les pays émetteurs fassent le nécessaire pour contenir l'augmentation de la température mondiale à 1,5 degré Celsius. Lors de la COP27, nous devons travailler ensemble pour garantir que les pays en développement aient accès à des niveaux adéquats de financement climatique pour mettre en œuvre nos engagements climatiques. Nous devons avoir accès au financement pour faire face aux impacts climatiques qui se produisent déjà, endommageant nos communautés vulnérables et nos environnements naturels. Les pays vulnérables doivent être en première ligne de l'urgence climatique et nous devons vraiment être forts et efficaces dans nos messages sur toutes nos priorités et surtout sur la finalisation du communiqué du CVF Accra-Kinshasa, qui est une étape critique et une opportunité pour y parvenir. Je voudrais également souhaiter la bienvenue et remercier le Ghana dans son rôle en tant que nouveau président du CVF. Il s'efforcera de déployer des efforts au niveau mondial pour préserver l'objectif de 1,5 degré d'augmentation de la température mondiale. Je vous remercie tous pour votre temps et vous souhaite une réunion fructueuse. Merci.
Thank you very much for the inspiring statement. The initiative shown by DRC in holding this pre-COP has been remarkable. It is a clear signal to the world that your administration places climate action at the forefront of its priorities. Excellencies, distinguished attendees, I would now like to call on Egypt, Honorable Sameh Sakiri, the incoming president of COP27 in Egypt. Honorable, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm happy to be participating with you today, and I hope that your deliberations so far have been quite productive. Allow me to start by conveying my appreciation for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today, this important session of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, to extend my thanks to the Republic of Ghana for the constructive role it has been playing as the current chair of the forum. Climate change has become, as you would all agree, an existential threat to all humanity, especially those of us in countries most affected by its impacts, countries and communities that are most vulnerable and not able to address these impacts in a comprehensive manner. Vulnerable nations and communities are not only bearing the most impact, but they also experience on a daily basis the manifestations of inequality and injustice in the global response to climate change. In this regard, allow me to demonstrate the most glaring of these injustices and inequities. First and foremost, the very fact that those suffering the most today from the negative impacts of climate change are those who, beyond any doubt, have contributed close to nothing to the predicament we are facing. Yet they are called upon to contribute to its resolution. Another sign of inequity is evident in the availability and the direction of resources to address mitigation on one hand and adaptation, resilience, and loss and damage on the other hand. The overwhelming majority of climate finance is directed towards emissions reductions, and scarce resources are made available to address the urgent humanitarian needs for vulnerable countries and communities to adapt to climate change, which has in many cases devastated lives, livelihoods, and economies. Furthermore, much of the finance available for climate is delivered in the form of loans, with only 6% in the form of grants. This obviously leads to further worsening of the already alarming debt crisis in many countries, not to mention the need for many developing countries to divert funds from their national budgets to address climate change at the expense of essential services such as healthcare, education, and basic infrastructure. It is thus essential that policymakers, business leaders, financial institutions, MDBs, and others be aware of these inequities and commit to addressing them and to restoring balance and equity to this process, not only on moral or ethical grounds, but equally important to ensure continued commitment and buy-in by all countries and communities. Having said that, fact remains that the impacts of climate change continue to worsen. Therefore, we must act now, we must work together in a non-adversarial manner, and we must move from negotiations to implementation, from pledges and commitments to actions on the ground. This is what we intend at COP27 to be all about. This means that we have a number of priority issues that must be addressed urgently. We need to cut emissions and ensure that rising temperature stays well below 2 degrees while keeping the 1.5 degree target alive. We must ensure food and water security. We must guarantee fair financing, cleaner energy, and continued technological innovations and availability. As incoming COP presidency, we have consistently maintained that now is time for implementation. And since we are all aware of the mitigation gap, as well as the gaps in adaptation and finance, we must therefore take practical action on the ground to start bridging those gaps. On mitigations, we have continuously urged all parties to show more ambition through updating their NDCs, and on the negotiations front, we must deliver a solid mitigation work program at COP27. On adaptation, we must make meaningful progress on the pledge made in Glasgow to double adaptation finance, and we need to make and capture meaningful progress on the global goal for adaptation. On loss and damage, we are keenly aware of the injustice caused by the decades of neglect to this serious issue, and hence we have hosted several rounds of informal consultations aimed at facilitating a universally accepted outcome, particularly with regard to financing loss and damage. We acknowledge that this is a matter of priority to many of your countries, and we commit to exert every effort to see it addressed at COP27. And lastly, we need to address the climate finance conundrum through ensuring availability of highly concessional or grant-based finance to developing countries, while stressing the importance of MDBs, private investments, and philanthropies as an indispensable part of the equation. Before concluding, allow me to share with you what we describe as Egypt Action Plan, through which we aim at making COP27 a transformative moment in global climate action. First, Egypt will be hosting the Sharm el-Sheikh Climate Summit for implementation on the 7th and 8th of November. Summit is open to heads of state and government and would follow an interactive format, allowing heads of state and government to participate in various round tables, in addition to delivering national statements. One of these roundtables will focus on impacts of climate change on vulnerable nations and communities in recognition of the importance of this matter to many countries across the globe. Second, we are launching a number of initiatives covering a broad array of climate activities, such as food security, water security, decent life for Africa, waste management, just energy transition, and many more. We've reached out to various parties and stakeholders to see these initiatives, and my team stands ready to consult with you on both. I invite you to join these initiatives and benefit from the opportunities they offer. And third, COP27 will include 11 thematic days dedicated to the central issues relevant to climate change. This includes days on finance, science, water, energy, decarbonization, solutions, gender, youth, and others. I thank you and look forward to seeing you all in Sharm el-Sheikh in a few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Shakiri, for your impactful statement. This promises to be a truly ambitious COP under Egypt's leadership. This is a crucial time indeed for our planet and for its people. We cannot stand to wait another day to take action. Thank you very much, sir. At this point, I would like now to give the floor to the representative and advisor of Secretary John F. Kerry, U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate. Mr. Trigg, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I will be fairly brief, as I was a fairly late invitee to this, and Secretary Kerry was unable to make it. But thank you very much for allowing us to participate with you. You all represent an incredibly important constituency in our process. And when we think about going to our Congress and to others, we think of you and we describe you as the focus of our efforts to secure support. So I can tell you that that's very much on our minds. And at times we even have representatives from your group talk directly to Congress to try to help with that effort. We are looking to be as active and constructive as possible to make Sharm el-Sheikh a success. And that means contributing to outcomes in all of the pillars: mitigation, adaptation, finance, and now loss and damage. And I want to thank our colleagues from the DRC for providing this really great space for our ministers to share views and better understand the aspirations and underlying concerns of parties. I know that Secretary Kerry benefited immensely from this discussion, so I very much appreciate it. So one thing I would say, I mean, you have this voice, the voice of this this group is so important in pushing ambition in all areas. And, you know, in some countries, there's a lot of pressure domestically. In other countries, it's really up to the international process to apply the kind of pressure that leads to forward movement. And there's really no better voice than the members of this group speaking individually and collectively. And obviously, we won't always be able to be as responsive as you would like us to be, as quickly as we can be on some of these issues. But I can tell you that at home, you know, Secretary Kerry has had an enormous influence on our president and the entire cabinet in moving every one of the pillars forward. You know, we're quite proud to be part of a team that is trying to do that. So please have our assurance that we consider ourselves to be both aligned with you and trying to work on your behalf, both in international contexts and at home. Thanks.
Thank you very much, United States of America. The CVF stands ready to work and cooperate with the US on this vital issue. On that note, I would like to invite to the floor the Executive Vice President of the European Green Deal at the European Commission, Honorable Frans Timmermans. Mr. Timmermans, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor, and thank you very much, Ghana, for organizing this meeting, which is both urgent and timely. You know, we've seen across the world, one after the other disaster, and most of these disasters are directly linked to the climate crisis we all face. And it's also clear that although the whole of humanity is vulnerable in this, some are far more vulnerable than others. And I believe it is high time that these differences in vulnerability, you know, we tend to say we're all in the same boat, but frankly, we're not. We're all on the same ocean, but not in the same boat. And we need to make sure that everybody has a boat that can survive the wild seas that we're facing today, and we will be facing for the foreseeable future. If we can keep our 1.5 degrees alive, then the situation will not get much worse, but it will not get better. So vulnerabilities will remain, and the most vulnerable countries will be most affected by this. And I believe we need to have a much more internationally embedded structure to face this challenge. We're slowly getting there in the European Union. The EU and its member states, as well as the European Investment Bank, support the climate finance amounted to more than 23 billion euros in 2020 alone. This contribution has increased steeply over the last years, more than doubling since 2013. And almost half of this contribution in 2020 went to adaptation or to actions tackling both adaptation and mitigation. We are stepping up our efforts as the climate crisis becomes more pressing. For the period up to 2027, the climate finance target of the European Commission has been raised to 35%. Global Gateway, our sustainable connectivity strategy, will strengthen our climate adaptation efforts, I'm sure. The establishment of the Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh work program on the global goal on adaptation at COP26 was a significant step towards progressing into concrete actions on a wide range of topics. The European Union recognizes that loss and damage associated with the adverse effects of climate change is an increasingly serious challenge. We are committed to strengthening and scaling up support for existing institutions and initiatives that assist vulnerable communities. And I salute Egypt for putting this subject on the agenda of this COP so that we can start in earnest to discuss the measures we could take collectively and individually. We expect COP27 to send a strong political signal of commitment to enhance the financing architecture for averting, minimizing, and addressing loss and damage. This should include a recognition of major new initiatives, such as the Global Shield against disaster and climate risks, UNSG initiative on early warning systems, and other developments in the international financial architecture outside of the UNFCCC, but with tangible positive impact for financing activities related to loss and damage. I can't say this enough. We have to review our international financial architecture to make sure the instruments are much, much better suited to, for instance, allow for private capital to be invested massively where that is possible. And I think our international financial system is not up to that task today, even if there are some very positive exceptions, such as the IMF, which is under the leadership of Kristalina Georgieva, taken really good steps forward. I think there's much more that can be done there, and the European Union is strongly committed to that. We will also support the effective delivery of the commitment to mobilize jointly $100 billion per year to address the needs of developing countries. But let me just underscore that ramping up climate finance will require a joint effort involving both public and private finance, as I said. And also, we need to become more granular. We need to look at the necessities of individual vulnerable states, which are not all the same necessities. And it cannot be an excuse to do nothing when you say, well, they're all different. No, they're all different, which means that our task to make sure that we tailor our efforts to the needs of the individual states becomes more urgent. And the European Union is strongly committed to that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir, for those assuring words. On that, I would like to invite Her Excellency Jennifer Morgan, State Secretary and Special Envoy for International Climate Action, Federal Foreign Office of Germany. Madam, your remarks.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and I'm very honored to be here with you, with all of you. So thank you for including us. You're a very important set of countries, I mean, as a group, but also individually. And I think our collaboration is just a major priority for us, and we're keen to really listen, to learn, and to deepen our collaboration with you. And thank you, DRC, for just an excellent hosting and meeting and bringing us here together. It's been just a whirlwind, intense number of days with so many impressions, so many exchanges. So I go home with many new ideas and thoughts. So thank you very much.
You're very much welcome.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here. And also, Ghana, for you for bringing us together today. I mean, I won't speak too long because I think we all know what we're in this moment of a climate crisis, but not just a climate crisis, a debt crisis, a food crisis, an energy crisis. And I guess the words that I'm thinking about going into this COP are across the board: ambition, solidarity, and acceleration of implementation. And on all of those issues, really, and also really knowing the special situation of the vulnerables across all of those. If we see what's happening at 1.1 degrees, I just don't even, we have to imagine and prepare for what could happen at higher, but it's, I think it really brings it home. And I guess I just also want to make sure that we're operating, or we're in the midst of a very intense geopolitical time, and that those geopolitics that they need to bring us actually in this space more together to accelerate the pace of change to a zero carbon, resilient, renewable, and energy efficient future and today. And we're very, and focused on climate justice as well. In Germany, we're doing our best. We've updated our NDCs so that we're aiming for a 65% reduction by 2030, a 2045 greenhouse gas neutrality goal. And we're also really redoubling our efforts on accelerating renewables and energy efficiency. Today, I just got news that our economics minister has agreed to the phase out of a lignite mine in a very important area that's been brought forward 8 years to 2030. And you may hear, and I just wanted to be clear here, I said something yesterday about this. We are having to take some short-term measures because we have to replace a tremendous amount, us and other European countries, of fossil fuels. But we are working that will be less fossil fuels and phasing out those fossil fuels and really focused on zero carbon future. Also, obviously, financing and access are key priority for Germany as well, working across the board there. The 100 billion has to be met. It's terrible that it hasn't been met. I'm now working with my colleague from Canada at the request of the COP26 president on a progress report on the delivery plan to 100 billion. And I think some of the areas there, and that's what I'm keen to listen, are also areas that I think are important for you all, but access, adaptation, the doubling, also the international financial institutions and the private sector.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will be right back as we try to reconnect. 1 second.
The special representative of the United Nations Secretary General for Climate Change to deliver his remarks. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And like has gotten significantly harder. So no one should blame you, quite frankly, for really ensuring for fighting for your lives, in terms of fighting for your lives. So my simple message to you this afternoon is to be as blunt and be as vocal as possible across all of the pillars of the Paris Agreement. We are in serious trouble. The ones who are being hit the hardest are you. The ones who will go first are you. And therefore, please do not hesitate in your battle against the climate crisis. So the Secretary General has been very clear. He has called for the acceleration of action across all of the pillars of the Paris Agreement. Extremely consistent with everything that you have in your communique. On mitigation, we need to press the G20 countries to be more ambitious in terms of their mitigation commitments. We need your voice and your support across the board, recognizing, of course, that not all G20 countries are alike, but collectively, this group represents 80% of global emissions. We need your voice in supporting the Secretary General's call for a renewable energy revolution. We have the technical and the financial tools at our disposal. Science tells us that wind, solar need to be at 60% of power generation globally by 2030. So your voice calling for acceleration of action over the course of this decade is absolutely essential. On adaptation, 13 years later, adaptation represents a mere 25% of total climate finance. We should all be collectively embarrassed that despite what we know from science and what we're seeing in terms of impacts, adaptation finance continues to lag significantly behind mitigation finance. One of the most startling numbers coming from the recent IPCC reports is that if you're living in Africa, South or Central America, a small island developing state, or South Asia, you're 15 times more likely to die from a climate event. 15 times more likely to die from a climate event. This type of inequality is outrageous. And the international community, our colleagues who are sitting around the table, who have the capability and capacity to step up support, must do we must all do a lot better, including the UN system. On the issue of finance, your voice is desperately needed on calling for the deep and structural reforms of the multilateral development banks. These institutions created 70 years ago are not fit for purpose. You know it, you are the recipient countries. However, you are minority shareholders. The colleagues who you have sitting around the table, sorry, colleagues, I'm going to put you under pressure. It is in their hands. They are the majority shareholders of these institutions. It is in their hands as the owners, majority owners of these institutions to make, as Minister Shukri said, make these institutions fit for purpose in a climate emergency. So please use your voice with the majority shareholders, the major shareholders, to press for rapid MDB reforms, including addressing many of the challenges associated with access. And finally, on loss and damage, we need to do a lot better. It is clear that there is this emerging consensus on a way forward, and we really need to use COP27 coming up really to make tangible and practical progress to ensure that the losses and damages that you are already seeing, you are put in a much stronger position to address them. So colleagues, you can depend on a strong voice from the Secretary General. I hope you read and listen to his statements. He has been very clear in what needs to happen. Your needs, your concerns are his priorities, and we look forward to continuing to work with the CVF. We don't have another 13 years to solve this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hart. It is quite refreshing to hear from the Secretary General. His pat on our shoulders and asking us to forge on. It is very refreshing. Thank you. Now, the next, I would like to invite Mr. Tosi Impanu, the CVF Thematic Ambassador for Renewable Energy, to deliver a remark. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Excellencies, esteemed guests, and fellow participants. I deliver this statement on behalf of the CVF Thematic Ambassadors in my own capacity as a Thematic Ambassador for Renewable Energy. I'm honored to be here today with you, the leaders of the climate vulnerable nations. The climate crisis is the most pressing challenge of our time, and we must work together to find solutions. The CVF is an important forum for the climate vulnerable countries. Since 2009, the CVF has joined together countries that were historically disconnected from global climate talks and has brought them into the fold through an agenda that reflects their needs and priorities. Our CVF ambassadors have been instrumental to increase the visibility of the CVF and to further promote its key priorities and messages. The thematic ambassador's mandate is to help increase outreach, networking, communications, and engagement of key actors for this forum of 55 climate-threatened nations to advance its causes in the identified core areas of ambition led by His Excellency Mohammed Nasheed, former President of the Maldives, Speaker of the People's Majlis Representatives, vulnerability, Parliament led by Her Excellency Ms. Lauren Legarda, Deputy Speakers of the Philippines House of Representatives, vulnerability led by Her Excellency Ms. Saima Wazed Hussain, International Focal Point of the Advisory Group on Disability and Disaster Risk Management of the Ministry of Disaster Management of Bangladesh, culture led by Her Excellency Ms. Katie Jetnil Kijiner, Climate Envoy for the Marshall Islands and CVF Thematic Ambassador, and finally myself, leading as CVF Thematic Ambassador of Renewable Energy. We need to make sure that we are making progress on issues that matter to the most climate vulnerable countries and communities. We must ensure that there is funding availability for our adaptation efforts as well as the mitigation project designed specifically for regions. We cannot separate ourselves from our environment. So when we talk about climate change, we are talking about an issue that affects everyone on this planet. We are not all affected equally, and it is our communities that will suffer the most from its impacts. This year, the effects of climate change have been particularly felt across the world, from drought and wildfires to sea level rise and flooding across our coastal areas. And unfortunately, these effects are leading to strains on our communities' resilience to adapt. The window to protect the 1.5-degree goal of the Paris Agreement is narrowing. The Climate Vulnerable Forum strives to fully implement the CVF vision 100% renewable energy target through a just transition approach towards environmentally sustainable livelihoods, emphasizing to protect ecosystems and vulnerable countries. As we rebuild our economies and communities, renewable energy must be part of building back stronger to fully eliminate poverty, enable job opportunities, and build more resilient communities through low carbon economies. Climate change is one of the most pressing issues of our time, and it is imperative that we take action to mitigate and adapt to its effects through concerted and focused efforts. Every step that we take to bring down global emissions is a step in the right direction for future generations. There is a renewed urgency among world leaders and the people of the earth to take action, and we must harness this momentum to drive change. We must not lose sight of the fact that we can and will triumph over this challenge. I'm confident that together we can build a more sustainable future for our planet. On behalf of all the CVF thematic ambassadors, I thank you for your participation today and your continued support of the forum. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Tozi, thematic ambassador, you and your colleagues have been providing valuable service to CVF. Thank you for the remarks. We now call on Marshall Lance to give a statement. If Marshall Lance is not ready, sorry. Okay.
Apologies. I've been listening and also putting together my own reactions to all of the very rich interventions that are being made. And just first, I want to thank you, Ghana, for bringing us together here today. I know that it represents a lot of work on your behalf, as well as the Secretariat, and it's very appreciated. Especially given the challenges that I know we all face in doing this work. I would like to thank the CVF in developing this statement. It's a very important time, especially for our voices to be heard, and it's a very effective expression of those voices. In particular, we are very glad to see that 1.5 is front and center, and cannot emphasize enough the importance of keeping that at the core of what we're doing in order to safeguard all of us. And particularly the call for enhanced 1.5 aligned NDCs is very welcome. I also want to affirm what we have heard from others, but in particular very well expressed by Mr. Selwyn Hart, the need for ambition across all the pillars of the Paris Agreement, so on adaptation and finance, and as well as on loss and damage. We also know that we have to see for a lot of those commitments to be realized, we have to see concrete action in the sectors that matter most. And as vulnerable countries, we know we must use every tool that is at our disposal to reduce emissions. And I just going to speak from the experience of the Marshall Islands here. And in addition, online, we have Vanuatu from the Pacific who's asked me to make a point on their behalf. And which is that, we had proposed 2 such additional tools for inclusion in the CVF statement. One on shipping, which was from the Marshall Islands, and from Vanuatu on the request for the ICJ opinion on state obligations on climate change. And it is disappointing that neither of these proposals are reflected in the latest version. I think that as small delegations, we are from the Pacific in particular. We have capacity constraints and not always able to have experts present at some of the technical level meetings where I think that decision was made. And I just think it's very important to recognize those constraints and hope that, our priorities don't therefore get lost as we come to these higher level meetings. So I just really look forward to solidarity from other members of the CVF on these issues going forward. I wanted to just mention as well that adaptation is of critical importance to us as it is to all of those who are part of this group. And we very much support the call for a doubling plan on adaptation finance. But just note that for that to succeed, we will need a big political push to this effect in the coming weeks. And so very much appreciate the work that the CVF is doing in that regard. And finally, on loss and damage, I think the emphasis on loss and damage, it couldn't have come, well, it should have been much sooner. Thank goodness, thank God it's here now. And we believe that we are making some progress in our conversations thus far, but I think we can all agree that we have much more work to be done. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Madam. The concerns put across is very much noted. I personally am privy to the Vanuatu's ICJ opinion on climate change. We take it up. Thank you very much. At this point, we call on Rwanda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm
you, sir.
Ambassador Vincent Karega, standing in for Minister of Environment, Dr. Jeanne d'Arc Mjawa Maria. Rwanda will not say much as most has been elaborated. We would like to thank DRC for convening the pre-COP and congratulate Ghana for well chairing this important forum. We therefore wish, like everyone here, that a clear message to the world to recall the agency to accelerate adaptation action and catalyze effective and predictable finance to deal with climate change impact in most threatened countries, including Rwanda, is very crucial. So we all know, as it has been highlighted, that climate change is no longer a story, but it is a serious issue that is threatening our world. So we need to work together in solidarity, cooperation, in sharing knowledge, resources, so as to ensure that we make our world better and we leave a legacy of a better world. We therefore support the content of the Accra-Kinshasa communique as a basis for us to better negotiate. I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, His Excellency, the Ambassador. I now call on Maldives to give a remark. Madam, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for convening us. And I'd also like to thank the DRC for the hospitality. We've been having a really fruitful time at pre-COP, and there's been lots of discussions around. The CVF is very close to our hearts. It was founded by our former President Nasheed, and since the 13 years, I think the CVF has played an important role in collectively giving voice to the most vulnerable countries. And here it's important to note that in this table alone, there are vulnerabilities of very different kinds. ranging from small island states to large states with forests and other biodiversity. So it is very diverse. And I think this also adds to the beauty of CVF, that it brings together different regions, but we are collectively calling for actions that would help us all live well into the future, especially as we all are facing the consequences of the 1.1 degree world. And in this regard, in terms of the ambition, it is really important for the Maldives that the 1.5 is kept alive and that we don't regress, especially in the context of the current geopolitical situation in the world. So we really hope that together we can urge countries to keep to their promises and also make bolder and more ambitious steps to move away from the fossil fuels into the renewable energy. And this is very crucial in developed world as well as the developing world in order for energy security, for climate change, and also into adapting into the future. In terms of climate finance, the CVF and the V20, of course, does an incredible job in bringing to light the very many challenges that we face in accessing finance and also in terms of identifying better plans and strategies on accessing them. So there's lots of work that's been done, and the Maldives has also been working with the CVF in order to prepare our prosperity plan that would be focused on adaptation and mitigation and adaptation. Everything is important for us, but for countries like us, adaptation is very, very crucial because it is very much tied with our sustainable development and also how we are able to cope into a world where our main resource, the coral reefs, are going to be under severe threat from the increase in the temperatures. So therefore, I can't emphasize how much we value the work that's been done in the adaptation space in the CVF, and also going into COP. We really hope to see significant progress in the work that we're doing in the area of the global goal and adaptation. I really sincerely believe that the global goal and adaptation should be defined and the work programs should ideally be concluded in COP28 so that we can start working out on how to operationalize finance and technology and the capacity needed to implement the adaptation plans for countries like us. So that's something that we're looking forward to. In terms of loss and damage, just as Tina mentioned, there is so much to be done. And the fact of the matter is, whether you are Pakistan or the United States or Antigua and Barbados, we are all being affected by the impacts of climate change. And for this reason, it's so important that we make significant progress in loss and damage as well. So I am hoping that Egypt will deliver, especially because it is going to be the implementation COP, and it is a place where we're looking to learn from each other, from things that have worked, and it is a place where we'll hopefully make coalitions with the private sector and with the civil society and all different groups to find solutions. So with that, I'll conclude. Thank you, Chair, for this opportunity.
Thank you, Lady Maldives. At this point, I would like to call on my good friend, Mr. Anthony Nyong, Senior Director for Africa, Global Center on Adaptation. Please, sir, may you take the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm actually standing in for Professor Patrick Fecoin, the CEO of the Global Center on Adaptation, who is unavoidably absent. He would have loved to be here, but other commitments came. So I'll just read his speech. The Global Center on Adaptation is proud to be managing partner of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. We view this constituency as a vital part of the international policy making and action agenda for climate adaptation. The nations most vulnerable to the climate emergency are for sure those that have the keenest interest in seeing climate adaptation perform to the greatest possible extent, and that refers to this group. As a leading international organization entirely dedicated to climate adaptation, we are pleased to walk this path with you. We take note of the elements of the communique relating to adaptation. In particular, 1, they ask for COP27 to deliver a standalone implementation plan on the doubling pledge of adaptation finance by 2023. 2, the call to streamline and improve access to financing for the most vulnerable nations. And 3, the call for the full delivery of the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, as well as similar scale programs to be mobilized in other regions. These points have been echoed by the Africa Adaptation Summit that the Global Center on Adaptation convened with the African Union and the African Development Bank just about a month ago.
No, that's it. I have a meeting. Thank you.
We also fully agree with the importance of improving access to climate finance, which has been an important part of the Global Center on Adaptation's country programs, particularly in Africa. We look forward to continuing to raise the profile of these perspectives as we move towards COP27 and beyond. His Excellency, Mr. Macky Sall, the President of the Republic of Senegal and Chair of the African Union, the Global Center on Adaptation, the African Development Bank, and the African Union will host the Africa Adaptation Leaders Summit at COP27. We are looking forward to the full capitalization of the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program and its upstream facility by COP27 to unlock massive adaptation potential for Africa. In moving forward, the Global Center on Adaptation looks forward to working with all CVF members in all regions to mobilize accelerated adaptation action at scale. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks to Professor Patrick and GCA for the statement. I must say that the summit in Rotterdam that you alluded to was fully participated by the president of CVF, president of Ghana, Nana Addo Dankwa-Akufo-Addo. And personally, I felt it was quite very, very useful, and it served the purpose that the organization intends pursuing. Thank you. At this point, I've been provided with a speakers list by the Secretariat. Please, if you can flag to them or to make it clear if you would like to take the floor. Following members, we also take any statements of observers in the room. I now want to call on the coordinator of the CVF presidency, Dr. Techiwabin, to share the report of the preparatory CVF senior officials meeting of 27th September 2022. Please, Doc, you may take the floor.
Thank you very much, Honorable and the Special Envoy of the Ghana CVF presidency, for the opportunity to actually make clear to you the report of the CVF senior official meeting, which has been dubbed as the Accra-Kinshasa communique. I'm honored to present to this high-level body report of the senior officials meeting convened by Ghana on behalf of the CVF senior officials, which was held in Accra, Ghana, and virtually on 27 September 2022. The senior officials of 32 delegations from among the 55 members and observers of the CVF convened from noon GMT, concluded our business around 2 p.m. Deliberations centered on the outcomes of the 4 regional consultations, and then on the 6th and then the 7th of September across all the member regions of the globe. I'm talking about Africa, Latin America, Asia, and Pacific. It was consolidated the different regional priorities into a draft Accra-Kinshasa communique of the CVF, which we finalized for consideration for this high-level meeting. I will now highlight the key elements of the communique for the awareness of today high-level meeting as follows. Recalling of the Dakar-Glasgow Declaration of the CVF from November 2021, naming key priorities from COP27. One on the priorities, number one, loss and damage. Securing a dedicated financial commitment from responsible nations to address loss and damage of the world's most vulnerable nations and mechanisms of financing, including financing facility and the global shield as a key outcome of COP27. Number two, as a related adaptation action, a standalone implementation plan of the Dublin Pledge by developed countries on adaptation finance to 2025. Operationalization of the global goal on adaptation at COP27 need to support the most vulnerable countries, not only to survive, but also to thrive. Number three, 1.5 degrees ambition. Responsible and large polluting nations must act in 2022 to align their NDCs with the 1.5 degrees goal. COP27 must, in any case, substantially strengthen the scale and pace of the effort to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal alive. Number four, on finance. The new collective quantified goal on climate finance should be need-based in terms of scale and volume, and responsive to the needs of most vulnerable developing countries, including by not increasing indebtedness and through a high and a growing emphasis on grant-based funding for adaptation for developing countries, particularly the vulnerable nations. Further priority areas likewise outlined are as follows. One, on adaptation, the African Adaptation Accelerator Program, and further such programs be fully mobilized in all world regions. Climate information and services to support decision-making, climate prosperity plans to deliver our development and climate agenda, cultural education, gender and youth engagement, health to protect our populations, labor and work space to protect our workers, migration for our community and displaced persons, Parliament mobilizing our legislative bodies, and the CVF Global Group Parliamentary Group, renewable energy processing towards our 100% renewable energy vision. In addition, key initiatives were moreover highlighted, including the National Climate Prosperity Plan of member states, the Climate Vulnerability Monitor, the Paris Goal NDC Alignment Traffic Light Assessment, the CVF Payment Overdue, online social campaign on loss and damage, the Low Carbon Monitor, and new campaign program for CVF Fellows and CVF Youth. We likewise highlight work with the V20 finance ministers through a joint technical committee and V20 CVF joint multi-donor fund, which development partners and members are encouraged to consider capitalizing it. Finally, the communique has also recognized the incoming CVF members for 2022, and they include Chad, La Côte d'Ivoire, Kyrgyzstan, and Sierra Leone, pending confirmation from this session. In closing, Ghana was recognized as a new CVF chair, and appreciation was expressed to the CVF thematic ambassadors, the Troika, and the Secretariat to Bangladesh for its excellent tenure as chair until May this year, and to Ethiopia for concluding many years of service on the CVF Troika. This brings the report of the CVF senior official meeting that was preparatory to the high-level session to an end. The full summary reports and the full text of the communique is in the meeting document. The draft communique is here with humbly submitted for consideration and adoption by the high-level meeting of the full forum today. I therefore thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Obeng, for sharing that very comprehensive report and for placing the Accra-Kinshasa communique before this body for consideration. Excellencies, participants, being given the report just shared and the communique that has been placed before us for adoption, I would like now to seek a motion to adopt the Accra-Kinshasa communique, which has been tabled to us by the senior officials. We likewise recognize with this very communique, the CVF is confirming a number of new members as has been enumerated earlier: Chad, Cote d'Ivoire, Kyrgyzstan, and Sierra Leone. Being given the foregoing, we are now here a motion for adoption from a member.
Yes, the Democratic Republic of the Congo would like to table the motion to have the Accra-Kinshasa communique adopted.
Thank you very much, sir.
Welcome.
Is there another member that will support the motion for adoption? A member supporting the motion for adoption? Rwanda. Thank you very much, Rwanda. Now I may want to call on another member who will second the support for the motion to be adopted. Is that seconded? Okay, thank you very much. As this motion has been tabled, supported, and seconded, if there is no consideration regarding this test, I will be really glad to declare the communique adopted. So the communique is adopted. Thank you very much. As there was no comment, I hereby declare the motion of the Accra-Kinshasa communique of CVF adopted. However, I think there is a need to congratulate all of us for the great work done that we have accomplished throughout this year to have this powerful communique that reflects the views and perspectives of the world's most vulnerable nations. Thank you once again for your support and kind attention. We will now hear the vote of thanks from Dr. Obeng as CVF Presidency Coordinator of the Environmental Protection Agency of Ghana.
Thank you very much, Honorable, for giving me the chance again to give the vote of thanks for our high-level meeting. It is my distinguished honor to express sincere thanks to all of you, especially the Honorable President of Ghana for his esteemed leadership and for hosting the CVF Forum of Vulnerable Nations. The Honorable President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, and then the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Environment of the Democratic Republic of Congo for holding the pre-COP 27 and its supporting events. Honorable. Yeah. Our thanks also go to His Excellency Ambassador Tosi Mpanu, Chair of the UNFCCC Substack and the CVF Thematic Ambassador for Renewable Energy, for his continued support in the forum's work. Our thanks also go to the ministers present here, high-level representatives here, heads of delegation of the Troika members, observers, and all delegates who are present here for this high-level event. Finally, I thank the CVF Secretariat team for all their efforts in organizing this event. May God bless you all for our efforts within the CVF. I thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. Quick one. I will now invite Mr. Fales Edward Arthur, the Chargé d'Affaires ad interim of Ghana to the DRC. A few closing remarks, sir, from your end.
Thank you, Honorable, for that honor. I'm pleased to share some closing remarks from the perspectives of Ghana CVF presidency. Ghana is pleased to host this global platform of sharing of viewpoints and conviction at this critical pre-COP CVF Forum of Vulnerable Nations. We appreciate all the interventions both from members and observers, particularly from our host, the DRC, as well as from our CVF thematic ambassadors represented by Ambassador Tosi Mpanu. The adoption of the CVF Accra Kinshasa communique is a milestone event of note, which we have taken a part in today. With this document, we have marked out the priorities and perspectives of the world's most vulnerable nations. We will be, if we are sure, for the better understanding of all parties, of the general public, and hopefully for the most robust possible outcomes from COP27 years down the road. We look forward to continue to look forward the key priorities of the CVF nations in the spirit of partnership and the international community in all these and other respects. With that, I am pleased to thank you all once more for your participation and to hand back to the chair, Honorable Kokofu.
Thank
for
you.
The adjournment of.
Thank you, Mr. Arthur. As we now conclude the CVF Forum of Vulnerable Nations in Kinshasa, I would like to say that proceedings will continue online, and my colleague from the Environmental Protection Agency Ghana will facilitate. Thank you to those high-level representatives of the CVF who have submitted their statements, which will now be released and are duly recognized in today's proceeding. We appreciate your kind support and the participation. Thank you once again. I remain Henry Kwabena-Kokofu, Executive Director of the Environmental Protection Agency of Ghana and CVF Presidency Special Envoy. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello.
Hello. Yeah, can we have a
group picture, please?
Family picture.
So there's one here. So I think yes, this one has.
Hello, hello, please. We are having a family picture, please. Please join us over here.
Hello. I greet everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Henry Kwabena-Popofu, for the introduction. We'll now begin the video statement segment of the high-level meeting. We'll first hear from the CVF members, starting with the statement by His Excellency Minister, Mr. M.D. Shahab Udin, MP, Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate Change, Bangladesh. Honorable Minister, you have the floor now.
Excellencies, Chair of the session, Honorable Ministers and Delegates, good morning and good afternoon. It is a great pleasure to participate in the first ever high-level pre-COP forum of vulnerable nation. At the outset, let me convey my heartiest congratulations of Ghana as the new chair of the CBF. I also express my sincere gratitude and appreciation to the Democratic Republic of Congo for hosting this important event aiming to adopt the Accra-Kinshasa communique of the CBF for successful outcome of COP27. Excellency, it is our great honor that Bangladesh was one of the founding members of CBF, and the Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina took the chairmanship of CBF for the second time for 2020-2021. In the Leaders Summit at COP26 and also at the Dhaka Glasgow Declaration of CBF, Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina presented clear and concrete proposal raising the following issues. One, the major emitters must submit ambitious NDCs and implement them in line with keeping 1.5 degrees Celsius alive. Number two, developed countries should fulfill their commitment for providing $100 billion. Number three, developed countries should disseminate clean, green, and advanced technology to the most vulnerable countries at affordable costs. And four, the issue of loss and damage must be addressed. Esteemed guests, as chair of the CBF, Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina launched a program to develop the Climate Prosperity Plan, which will be a strategic investment framework to mobilize international financing for implementing renewable energy and climate resilience initiatives in CBF countries. Bangladesh has already prepared Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan 2022-2041, strategic Bangladesh trajectory from vulnerability to resilience to prosperity. Excellencies, I would like to express our heartiest consensus to the draft climate for the CVF Accra Kinshasa community. Adaptation financing should be prioritized for achieving climate resilience in the climate vulnerable developing countries. We will propose at COP27 to establish a financial facility for loss and damage. Besides, our demand is that the major emitters must take ambitious mitigation targets and implement in line with keeping 1.5 degree Celsius alive. Moreover, the new collective quantified goal on climate finance has to be needs-based in terms of scale and volume. Public source should be the main source of climate finance with grant-based funding for adaptation. The delivery channel should also be clearly defined. Distinguished colleagues, finally, I appeal to the climate vulnerable fora. Let us work together for a successful outcome at COP27. Make sure that countries with the highest responsibilities and capabilities come forward and deliver their parts to combat the global climate change effectively. I thank you all.
Thank you very much for your intervention. I would now like to invite His Excellency Ms. Leila Kau, Minister of Environment, Tunisia, to deliver her statement. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres et chefs de délégation, je tiens avant tout à remercier le secrétariat du Forum des pays vulnérables pour les efforts fournis durant toute la période écoulée afin d'aboutir, sous la présidence active du Ghana, à préparer le communiqué d'Accra-Kinshasa, qui reflète une position commune à présenter à la 27e session de la conférence des parties à la Convention cadre des Nations Unies sur les changements climatiques prévue à Sharm el-Sheikh au mois de novembre 2022. Je tiens également à saluer le Bangladesh qui a assuré la présidence du forum durant le mandat précédent. Ce communiqué a mis en exergue les priorités des pays vulnérables sur des questions majeures liées au changement climatique, comme par exemple l'engagement et les mécanismes pour les pertes et dommages, une adaptation accélérée, le renforcement de l'ambition en matière d'atténuation ainsi que la réponse aux besoins des pays en matière de financement. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, nos pays souffrent de plus en plus des impacts croissants des changements climatiques sur les ressources et les écosystèmes naturels, sur les secteurs économiques et le développement en général. En effet, la rapidité des impacts enregistrés du changement climatique et la fréquence des extrêmes climatiques rend les mécanismes d'ajustement et le savoir-faire traditionnel insuffisants. Les changements climatiques sont aujourd'hui un enjeu écologique, socio-économique, voire sécuritaire. S'ils n'épargnent personne, ce sont les plus pauvres qui en souffrent le plus, car ils n'ont pas les mêmes moyens d'adaptation. Avec l'amplification du phénomène, le bien-être des populations et leurs revenus se détériorent. En Tunisie, nous constatons que les impacts des changements climatiques affectent particulièrement les populations et communautés pauvres et vulnérables, notamment les femmes rurales, qui ont une capacité limitée à s'y adapter. Pour y faire face, notre pays a confirmé sa volonté politique en termes d'accords pour le climat et d'action à travers différentes activités et mesures, parmi lesquelles l'élaboration et l'actualisation de la contribution déterminée au niveau national, avec des objectifs ambitieux dans le domaine de l'atténuation, de l'adaptation et des moyens de mise en œuvre. Également l'élaboration d'une stratégie nationale de développement neutre en carbone et résilient au changement climatique, en vue de contribuer à atteindre l'objectif global qui consiste à contenir le réchauffement de la planète à moins de 2 degrés d'ici la fin du siècle, tout en poursuivant l'effort pour parvenir à limiter cette hausse à 1,5 degré. La mise en œuvre de la CDN actualisée nécessite la mobilisation d'importantes ressources financières, estimées à environ 20 milliards de dollars des États-Unis, sur la période 2021-2030, dont 14 milliards de dollars pour l'atténuation et 5 milliards pour l'adaptation et les mesures d'accompagnement. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, la mise en œuvre effective et efficace de ces objectifs demeure fortement tributaire de la disponibilité des ressources financières, à travers une meilleure clarté des objectifs mondiaux en termes de financement. En effet, aggravée par les circonstances actuelles et émergentes dues à la pandémie et la flambée des prix des denrées alimentaires et de l'énergie, la situation délicate de nos économies requiert des réponses rapides pour soutenir les secteurs en difficulté. Ainsi, pour faire face à ces besoins d'investissement accrus, ces financements doivent être plus durables et prédictibles, et prendre en considération les principes de l'équité, la responsabilité commune mais différenciée, ainsi que les capacités respectives des pays. Je demeure convaincue que la lutte contre les changements climatiques n'est plus uniquement l'affaire des gouvernements, mais une responsabilité collective et partagée par tous les acteurs de la société, plus particulièrement le secteur privé. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, la Tunisie renouvelle son engagement ferme de contribuer à la protection de la planète contre les effets des changements climatiques, ainsi que son adhésion aux aspirations exprimées par le Forum des pays vulnérables dans le communiqué d'Accra-Kinshasa pour la COP 27. En réitérant mes remerciements au comité d'organisation et à la présidence ghanéenne pour son leadership, je souhaite plein succès.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. We'll now hear from Honorable Mr. Pakao Atonga, Minister of Agriculture, Republic of Vanuatu. Minister, the floor is yours.
Excellencies and fellow members of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, I address you in the midst of a climate crisis that is causing catastrophic damage to our vulnerable economies, our biodiversity, and our fundamental human rights. You will all appreciate the climate negotiations process appears to be moving too slowly. That does not reflect the devastation experienced every day in our communities by our families. Today, we seek the group's endorsement of an initiative aimed at injecting more ambition into the nationally determined contributions of parties to the Paris Agreement. In addition to the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, state parties ratified a range of conventions and treaties that contain protections against state activities that lead to global harm. Human rights conventions, law of the seas, and conventions on the rights of the child all contain obligations that states have already agreed to protect the most vulnerable. Clarity on the application of the existing treaties' obligations will motivate climate action. The United Nations International Court of Justice will offer a non-contentious advisory opinion to clarify how international legal norms are understood in the context of climate change. Let me be clear, this is not a court case. The results are non-binding, nor will there be winners or losers. The resolution does not mention sensitive issues like finance for loss and damage. A collective and constructive approach addresses locally driven actions, and ICJ advisory opinions will hold more moral and legal authority and have in the past changed state behaviors on critical global issues. ICJ will provide the legal clarity needed to develop more ambitious NDCs and save the Paris Agreement to avoid the overshoot of the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold. Excellencies, we ask the Climate Vulnerable Forum to stand with the more than 85 countries' endorsement of this global ICJ initiative, namely the leaders of the Caribbean, the leaders of the Pacific Island Forum, and the ministers of the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States. United, we can obtain the simple majority vote required at the current 77th session of the UN General Assembly for the advisory opinion on climate change to the International Court of Justice. My fellow vulnerable nations, we must stand united and resolve the insertion into the Accra-Kinshasa communique of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. This sentence, and I quote, to strengthen ambitious implementation of the Paris Agreement, the Climate Vulnerable Forum calls for the adoption of a resolution by the UN General Assembly requesting an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice on the application of states under international law to protect the rights of present and future generations against the adverse effects of climate change, unquote. The people and the government of the Republic of Vanuatu offer their utmost gratitude for your consensus to insert this sentence in the declaration. Vanuatu stands in solidarity with the Climate Vulnerable Forum as we employ every tool to prevent further harm to our beloved nations and islands and people. God bless you all.
Thank you for your statement, Honorable. We will now hear a statement from His Excellency Mr. Nasri Ahmed, Minister of Environment, Sri Lanka. Minister, the floor is yours.
Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Excellencies, it gives me great pleasure to address you today at this CVF pre-COP forum of nations. This meeting will strengthen the cooperation among our member countries and would help to achieve sustainable development while safeguarding the environment. I must extend sincere appreciation to the Democratic Republic of Congo and Climate Vulnerable Forum for hosting this meeting. Let me congratulate Ghana for the presidency of the CVF Forum for the next few years. Excellencies, distinguished participants, the adverse effects of climate change are reflected across the recovering economies of all CVF member countries. Therefore, this pre-COP high-level meeting is a timely and an encouraging preparatory process towards the UN Climate Change Conference COP27. Since Sri Lanka has been listed as one of the most vulnerable countries in the global context, implementing of climate actions are very vital to us. In this context, Sri Lanka expected to achieve its carbon neutrality by 2050. My ministry, the Ministry of Environment, is developing a roadmap to achieve this target. Sri Lanka is a member of the Climate Vulnerable Forum since 2015, which is engaged to obtain more opportunities for combating climate change impacts. I strongly believe that the proceedings of preparatory meetings such as this meeting will produce successful outcomes and recommendations targeting environment conservation and to address climate issues of member states. Your Excellencies and distinguished delegates, following good governing principles, His Excellency Ranil Wickremesinghe, the President of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, and myself as the Minister in charge of the subject of environment is very keen on sustainable environment management. It is indeed a great pleasure and privilege to announce that under the guidance of His Excellency the President, we are preparing Climate Prosperity Plan with the assistance of Climate Vulnerable Forum and V20 Group. 2 experts from the CVF came to Sri Lanka last week to develop the Climate Prosperity Plan and had several stakeholder meetings to develop it further. His Excellency the President wished to present Sri Lanka's Climate Prosperity Plan in the COP27 in Egypt. Finally, I wish this forum can discuss further about the Accra-Kinshasa communique of the CVF, providing our vulnerable nations with a powerful platform to convey our collective demands and proposals for COP27 while advancing CVF priorities. Concluding my statement, I wish to extend our appreciations to the Climate Vulnerable Forum for its efforts on the environment front, as well as for the valuable support extended for developing climate prosperity plan in Sri Lanka for better environment management. The deliberations of this meeting will help to proceed as significant and impactful decisions at the COP27 of the UNFCCC later this year. I wish this meeting all success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Honorable. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Javier Guterres, Secretary of Climate Change, the Presidency, and the Deputy Minister of Environment and Natural Resources, Paraguay, to deliver his remarks.
Estimados ministros, viceministros, jefes de delegaciones, amigos todos, queremos agradecer en nombre del pueblo y gobierno de Nicaragua la invitación a tan relevante foro, el cual compartimos enfoques comunes para enfrentar la crisis climática. La raíz del problema consiste en que las grandes economías capitalistas, por medio de los modelos destructivos de producción y consumo, han provocado de manera acelerada la crisis climática. Ya el cambio climático es historia, ahora es crisis climática, es también crisis planetaria y crisis de valores por la falta de principios cristianos y solidarios. Nos encontramos en momentos complejos, en un planeta sobrecargado de contaminación y nuestra madre tierra agoniza por el capitalismo salvaje. Las concentraciones de dióxido de carbono se encuentran en sus valores máximos nunca vistos en los últimos 2000 años y ya tenemos incrementos globales de temperatura de 1.1 grados centígrados. Nicaragua no ha causado la crisis climática, tampoco lo ha hecho Centroamérica ni los países que forman parte de este foro de vulnerabilidad climática. Esto es responsabilidad histórica de las grandes economías que aplican modelos de consumo y producción basados en la destrucción y contaminación de la madre tierra. Por lo tanto, debemos defender el principio de responsabilidades comunes pero diferenciadas y capacidades respectivas como el fundamento para la justicia climática y política de reparación. Nicaragua se adhirió al Acuerdo de París en el 2017, asumiendo el compromiso de fortalecer los intereses de los países más vulnerables y alinear sus políticas, estrategias e instrumentos de gobierno, con el fin de contribuir con la meta de limitar la temperatura global en 1.5 grados centígrados. Los esfuerzos políticos y financieros que realizan nuestros países no son ni serán suficientes si los países desarrollados no se comprometen seriamente a cambiar sus patrones de producción y consumo para frenar a tiempo la catástrofe climática a la que la humanidad se enfrenta y que ha sido confirmada por la ciencia. Se debe incluir un nuevo objetivo colectivo de financiamiento posterior al 2025, cuantificado a partir de la meta de movilización de los 100.000 millones de dólares anuales y que debe impulsarse con urgencia. Hermanos y hermanas, aunque la brecha financiera para enfrentar las múltiples vulnerabilidades que aquejan a Nicaragua representan al menos 2.000 millones de dólares anuales, para nuestro gobierno la principal herramienta para reducirla no es otra que la lucha contra la pobreza, que se valora junto con la acción climática como prioridades políticas. Continuaremos con los esfuerzos sostenidos de lograr el buen vivir para las y los nicaragüenses, pero seguiremos insistiendo ante la comunidad internacional en la urgencia de impulsar la justicia climática y así avanzar de manera colectiva y contundente hacia el logro de los objetivos climáticos y el cumplimiento de la Agenda 2030 de Desarrollo. En la próxima COP27, nuestra delegación insistirá en la responsabilidad de los países desarrollados para reducir las emisiones, así como en el compromiso de movilizar recursos financieros y predecibles para el financiamiento de las medidas de adaptación y de la reducción del impacto de pérdidas y daños producidos por los eventos climáticos extremos. Pero además aportaremos con lo necesario para evitar que los estados vulnerables sean considerados como potencias extranjeras como amenazas para su seguridad nacional. Las calificaciones negativas y estigmatizaciones no permiten avanzar sostenidamente en nuestros esfuerzos de adaptación y capacidad de respuesta ante los impactos del cambio climático. Muchas gracias.
We appreciate your remarks, Your Excellency. We now would hear from His Excellency Ms. Momtani, Under Secretary of State of the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, Cambodia. Honorable Ms. Tani, you have the floor.
Excellency Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First, Cambodia is pleased to welcome Ghana for taking over the presidencies of this forum. It is my great pleasure to join you today for this important event. We meet at a time when the impact of climate change are becoming more and more obvious to all. This year has seen extreme climate events devastating economy and society in all corners of the globe, impacting countries at all stages of development. After 2 years of the global pandemic, we are now facing the compounded impact of the climate change, cost of living, and energy crisis exacerbated by global geopolitical tension. In this context, it is more important than ever to ensure that the needs of the most vulnerable countries are fully considered at COP27. Cambodia is pleased to see that crucial issue is reflected in the proposed Accra-Kinshasa Declaration of this forum. These include the CVF ambitious proposal for the global goal on adaptation and for financing of loss and damage, and clear demand for climate finance at scale for the most vulnerable, with an increased focus on adaptation and on grant financing. While adaptation needs have to be addressed with a renewed sense of urgency, we must also keep pushing for higher mitigation ambition, particularly for high-emitting countries. The world is still on track to achieve the objectives set in the Paris Agreement, and failing to address this now will only pave the way to more intense and long-lasting economic crisis in the near future. As a party to the UNFCCC, Cambodia is doing her share in line with the principle of equity and common but differentiated responsibility and respective capacity. Despite playing a negligible role in global emission, we have updated our NDC in 2020. And in 2021, we became only the second least developed country to submit a long-term strategy for carbon neutrality with a 2050 target. In line with this strategy, Cambodia is committed to achieving 35% of renewable energy in her electricity generation mix by 2050, and will not approve any new coal power generation project. We have also introduced incentive for green investment in our new investment law. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to end with a plea to increase attention to the most vulnerable in our society. The poor, elderly, women, and children are disproportionately impacted by climate change, and these impacts are even more severe in our country. Adaptation programs need to be designed to take into account the specific needs of this group with their full participation. I hope this forum can document best practices in this field and advocate strongly for inclusive adaptation solutions. I would like to thank the government of Ghana and Climate Vulnerable Forum for their relentless commitment and advocacy for ambitious climate change action. Thank you.
Thank you, Mom. We'll now hear from a CVF Observer Nation with a statement delivered by Mr. Beksultan Ibramov, Deputy Minister, Ministry of Natural Resources, Ecology and Technical Supervision, Pakistan. Your Excellency Ibramov, you may now take the floor.
Dear participants of the Climate Vulnerable Forum high-level meeting, dear friends, greetings from the Kyrgyz Republic. Being a mountainous country in the very heart of the Central Asian region, we always stand for the interest of two highly vulnerable groups: the Central Asian countries with the total population of more than 76 million people, and the mountainous regions with 15% of total human population. We are the emitters of 0.03% of total volume of greenhouse greenhouse gas emissions. Each year, we suffer from the climate change much more than we influence. Over the past 40 years, we have seen an increase in average temperature for 1.6 Celsius degree. According to estimates, a conservative assumption is that climate-related disasters will cost around $156 million by 2032. Over the past 20 years, the country as a whole has seen an increase in natural disasters by 60%. It is likely to intensify land degradation, desertification, and in the long run, the shortage of water resources, which would straightly influence on the food and energy security for the whole region. The Kyrgyz Republic pays high attention on importance to climate change adaptation and resilience at all levels, an important condition for which is to establish and maintain the balance between economic development and environmental conservation. Strong political support and green dimension of development at the highest political level have already launched a chain of changes for the green transformation. We updated our NDC last year. According to our NDC, we are aiming at the mitigation by 44% by 2030, and we are aiming to reach carbon neutrality by 2050 with the strong support of our international partners. Now, to avoid leaving these ambitions as just promises, we have launched a number of national-level documents, such as President's Decree on Year of Mountainous Ecosystems Protection and Climate Resilience, 5-year National Development Program, and National Campaign for Afforestation Green Heritage until 2030. Thereby, the Ministry of Natural Resources, Ecology and Technical Supervision of the Kyrgyz Republic presents its compliments and expresses deep gratitude to the Climate Vulnerable Forum Secretariat for the assistance provided to implement climate change adaptation efforts of the country. Taking into account the above, our ministry will kindly ask to consider petition of the Kyrgyz Republic for the membership of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, confirming high level of interest. The functions of designated national focal point of the Kyrgyz Republic will be assigned at the deputy ministry level. The director of the Climate Finance Center will serve as additional focal point of the Kyrgyz Republic to interact with CVF. The ministry also reviews the findings of the regional consultations held in September this year and in common agrees with Accra-Kinshasa communique of the CVF. On behalf of the ministry, let me renew our assurance of the highest consideration. Thank you, and looking forward to see all of you in COP27.
Thank you for your statement. I would like to now invite Prof. Dr. Salim Hik, Chair of CVF Expert Advisory Group. And with this statement, we would conclude the screening of video statements. Prof, you have the floor.
On behalf of the Expert Advisory Group of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, I, Salim Haq, it gives me great pleasure to address the high-level forum meeting and congratulate Ghana on its presidency in the pre-COP 27 and COP 27 coming up. On behalf of the Expert Advisory Group, we would like to commend Ghana for the work that it is doing already and taking forward. The two things that I would emphasize from our side is for us to ramp up the arguments on the need for financing loss and damage. The CVF and V20 have done a pioneering activity in creating the loss and damage fund of their own. We now need to solicit contributions to that fund from all over the world, from everybody who wants to actually deal with loss and damage and not necessarily be stuck in the COP27 agenda discussion and agenda fight on the finance facility. We would certainly push for that and support it, but we should also deal with the impacts of climate change that are happening every single day all around the world, and people who are losing their livelihoods, losing their agriculture, losing their infrastructure, losing their homes, need to be given financial support immediately. And that's why we need to focus on immediate finance for the victims of human-induced climate change through the Loss and Damage Fund of the Climate Vulnerable Forum and the V20 finance ministers.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Dr. Salim Haq, for your remarks. We have now reached the end of the high-level intervention, and this is the end of the live streaming. My name is Derek Sapiyadon. Thank you for participating.